Howdy, y'all. Techie 101 here, alongside my best friend, Barry D. Brick. And today we're going to be making a video about Roger's own son, Porcus D. Ace. Yahoo! Okay, not going to do the southern accent the entire video, but hey, how come we don't make more Porcus D. Ace videos? He's such a popular character, right? Look at all the Ace merch, right? I kept grabbing all the, I gotta grab the Marinomi and the Funko Pop. We got 2 light novels written about the guy. We got those light novels adapted into a manga by Boichi, the same artist that did Sunken Rock and also Dr. Stone, right? And then I'm wearing this jacket. You know, it's got like the Whitebeard Jolly Roger on the back and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, he's such a popular character. Why don't we talk about him more often? Oh, that's right. He died. Yeah, that did happen. Wow, that was a while ago he died. What was that, like 2010? 2009? When did Ace die? It was a while ago. It was like 15, 16 years ago now already. Wow, One Piece, you know, like, we all know it's a long-running manga, right? But, like, every now and then, you actually sit back and think, and it's like, wow, Skypiea was, like, 2003. You know, that was a while ago. Oh, boy. All right, anywho, we're going to be talking about Ace today. You know what? Some information came out in the chapters where we learn that Gabon actually knew that Ace existed and that Roger had a son. Garp told him, and then Gabon passes that information on to Shanks. I am so happy that that line of dialogue was included, because I was going to make a video about this kind of anyway. I sort of touched upon this in a video I made a little while ago on, like, come on now, there is no way that, like, Rayleigh and Gabon and probably the other active members of the Roger crew, well, they're not active anymore, but when they were active members of the crew and they're currently not dead, they're just retired. I'm sure some of the Roger crew are dead. I'm sure not all of them are still alive to this day, but all of the ones that, you know, were part of the crew for a very long time and then, you know, are in retirement, they should have been able to piece together relatively easily that Ace was Roger's son. Like, the idea that they just didn't know, like, Rayleigh just, I didn't know Ace was Roger's son, and Gabon was like, I had no idea. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we're also going to talk about, well, if they knew, at least if Gabon knew, why didn't they get involved at Marineford? And honestly, I think there's a pretty good reason for it. I'm not really that upset on why they didn't get involved at Marineford or anything like that. If Ace ever got a chance to meet Roger, like, at any point, like, let's say Roger's still alive through some convoluted series of events. Let's say Ace were to eventually, like, everything in Ace's life was the same, but then eventually he finds out his dad is still alive and he actually got a chance to talk to Roger. What do you think he would do? What do you think he would talk about with Roger? Or do you think he would just immediately go up and just punch Roger right in the face or something? And then Roger would be like, Yorg, that's my son! You know, I think it would have been a really interesting conversation that I'm kind of upset that would never happen in the story, right? Unless, I mean, they're both dead now, so Oda could do something where, like, there is an afterlife, and we know there is an afterlife. Through Brook, we do know there is an afterlife in the One Piece world. It's just, other than very rare chances with, like, the Yomi Yomi no Mi and maybe a couple of other methods, you're not really going to come back to life, you know what I mean? So who knows? Maybe we'll see a series or a side story where Ace goes up to the great beyond and runs into Roger. Like, what kind of conversation would they say? What would they talk about? Would Ace bring up his mom? Probably, I would assume. And then, like, where that would go, because just fascinating comparisons there, considering how Ace felt about Roger. He never actually got a chance to meet him and talk to him. Would they eventually get along after a while, after they kind of, like, Roger told him the whole story and Ace told him everything about why he doesn't like him and stuff, and would they come to an understanding eventually? Curious. So let me know about that. That's a nice little thought experiment, I feel. Okay, so why didn't the Roger Pirates get involved at Marineford in any capacity there? Okay, so Gabon 100% knew. Garp straight up told him. We don't know exactly what Garp told Gabon, like, every single piece of information regarding Ace, or if he just said, hey, Roger had a son. Maybe he said Roger had a son, his name was Ace, something like that, right? He didn't go into full detail about every little thing, but at least Gabon was aware. I say that it's fairly obvious, especially if somebody has traveled with Roger as, their captain for so many years, that Ace was Roger's son, because, like, first of all, Roger did express interest to Rayleigh about having a kid. Not with Rayleigh and Roger being the parents, although that would have been a nice little that would have been a nice little thing. Rayleigh, I think we should have a kid together. Let's adopt, Rayleigh. Roger, this is all so sudden. But no, he's like, hey, I won't be able to find the One Piece. I'm going to be dead by then, Rayleigh. But one day, I'm going to have a son, perhaps, and then maybe he'll find the One Piece, right? So Roger already kind of expressed that to Rayleigh, that he might be having a kid. So I feel like throughout the course of the next 2 decades, Rayleigh would be sort of paying attention to the news and stuff, and then eventually Ace becomes well known as a famous pirate out there in the Grand Line. He was offered a warlord position. He had a bounty of over 500 million at one point, defeated a lot of really prominent people, defeated one of the 7 warlords, defeated Hanafuda, for God's sake, you know what I mean? So, like, there's a lot of stuff. He became a very notorious pirate, Ace. So you're looking at Ace's wanted poster as Silver's Rayleigh, or Scopper Gabon, or anybody, as Aereo, or Millet Pine, or like anybody of Roger's, crew. You're looking at this new pirate that's making big waves in the Grand Line, has the power of the Marimarinomi. His name is Portgas D. Ace. Now, the Portgas, you might not know much about, all right? I feel like Roger knew Rouge before, like, that he disbanded the crew. Or maybe they only met and they met after. I don't know. It seemed to imply that, he knew somebody that, like, I'm going to go retire and be with the woman I love. And, eventually Rouge gets pregnant, and then Ace is born 20 months later because Rouge was a badass, right? So I think they already knew about each other, but I don't know if Roger, like, made that known to the whole crew. Like, maybe he might have told Rayleigh, he certainly told Garp, but maybe he didn't tell his crew about Rouge. Okay, so the name Portgas might not mean anything to them, but he's got the Will of D, which, yes, there are other people all over the world that have the Will of D, but that kind of narrows it down a little bit, right? There's, like, I don't know, like a baker's dozen of characters that have the Will of D, a few more. How many of them actually become pirates, and how many of them, would be right around the same age as Roger's son, because, like, Ace died when he was 20, and he went out to sea at 17, and so that was, like, the arrangement between Luffy and Sabo and Ace to all go out to sea when they turn 17 and become pirates, right? Okay, so you're Silver's Rayleigh. You're looking at the newspaper. It's been, around 2 decades since Roger died. Yeah, many people have, well, the ages don't line up exactly because, remember, Rouge held Ace in her womb for 20 months, so the years would be off. But, like, even then, you're looking at this pirate named Portgas D. Ace. He has the Will of D. Ace was the name of Roger's sword, and he kind of sort of even looks like Roger. Like, you can see it. He has Rouge's freckles. He has his mom's freckles, but he looks like Roger and Rouge's son, right? Like, it's very clear. So, and what are the odds that the government would have information, like, to that degree also, that they would print in the newspaper? Like, this is Portgas D. Ace, and he was born on, actually, I think Ace's birthday was January 1st. It's the same birthday as Oda's, actually. Happy birthday to Oda. He's 51 now. I thought he was 50. No, that was last year. He's 51. Okay, happy birthday, Oda. But I don't think Rayleigh would be looking at that like, well, wait a minute. Willa D, and his name is Ace, and he kind of looks like Roger, and Roger did express interest in having a son, and he's a really powerful pirate, and he's from the East Blue. Right where Roger was from. Oh, right, the year is 1 off. He's 1 year too old. That doesn't make any sense. That can't be him. Yeah, I think there'd be a little bit of suspicion of, like, wait a minute now. This is Roger's son. All right, so we're going to assume they knew, they had an inkling that it was probably him. But why didn't they get involved? Well, is it their job to get involved? Like, seriously, was it Rayleigh and Gabon and the rest of the crew, like Crocus and everybody else's responsibility to watch after Roger's son? Did Roger tell them to do that? Did Roger go up to Rayleigh and be like, Rayleigh, I'm going to be having a son one day, and eventually he's going to seek you out, And when he does, I want you to watch over him, Rayleigh. I want you to make sure he can find the One Piece one day. Roger didn't say any of that shit. All right? He didn't say any of that shit. And also, going along with the idea that Rayleigh would know just from looking at the wanted poster that Ace was Roger's son, very specifically, his name is not Gol D Ace. That was the name Rouge originally wanted to give him, but he ended up taking his mom's name, Porcus D Ace, all right? So that could also be a factor, like, if they, and I also think that Rayleigh and Gabon and everybody else, they could have looked into this further. Like, they have an information. They know some stuff. They know a guy who knows a guy. Like, Rayleigh could have looked into this and he'd been like, all right, I'm going to look into this a little bit. Like, I'm going to find out what's going on with this Ace pirate, you know, what's happening here, right? Okay. And they could have maybe dug a little bit deeper and found out that, like, yeah, he's Roger's son. Yeah, it's like, fine. But the fact he's using the name Portgas might kind of cue up the rest of the crew, like, maybe he doesn't want anything to do with Roger. Maybe he doesn't want the family name. He wants to distance himself from the crew and from his dad. And ultimately, Ace is a big boy. He can handle himself, right? Like, he's a man. He can go out to sea and be a pirate and do his own adventure and his own thing. He doesn't need to be doted on by the rest of the Roger crew. All right. So I could see that as the logic behind that. And I honestly am not even really that upset about it, because you also got to remember, like, and this does, you know, piss people off, especially the way that Ace died, where Akainu was sort of egging him on, and then Ace could have just kept going, but he turned around. He's like, you don't say that shit about Pops. You know what I mean? And then it's like, Ace, you fucking idiot. Why didn't you just keep going? You know what I mean? But you got to remember, like, this is a world where things like honor, especially like even in the world of pirates, that means something. And it certainly meant something to Ace. You know, Whitebeard was the man that saved him and helped him out in a lot of different ways, gave him something he never really had up until then, a father figure, because Roger is long dead. Garp barely shows up, and he hates his father anyway. So, like, Whitebeard was the guy that showed up and really was that father figure to Ace and a lot of other people too. And so Akainu was shitting on him. Like, I know you're playing me here, but I'm not having that, right? Now, in the case with Ace, he really did seem genuinely like a little bit hot-headed and be like, okay, we're almost out. Wait a minute, you saying shit about Pops, you mother, you know, like, and it's like he's going after him, right? So there's kind of a vibe there with that. You could disagree with it or not. I could bring up issues with, like, hey, Ace, dude, your father, Whitebeard, mobilized not only his entire fucking crew, but multiple crews from all over the New World. Your brother is also here. Everybody's getting involved just to save you. So yeah, even though Akainu is shitting on your dad, maybe you just kind of let that one slide, because a lot of people are putting their necks out for you right now. Maybe you just let it go and keep going, because, you know, a lot of people got involved in this project. You know, right? Like, maybe for the sake of their effort, maybe you just, oh man, okay, Akainu, you know what? Not gonna fight you now, because a lot of people risk their life to save me, but I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna kick your ass someday, right? Like, and then he could just leave, and, you know, whatever. And then, you know, also, not a guarantee he would have gotten away, even if he didn't, if Akainu didn't provoke him right now. Let's say Akainu tries to provoke him and he doesn't fall for it and he kept going. You know, still not a guarantee he would have gotten out of 100% alive, you know what I mean? As opposed to 50% alive. He might have been half alive by the end of it. But anyway, yeah. So we see Rayleigh. What's he up to while this is going on? He's getting drunk. He's getting drunk. He's at Sabaody drinking rum or whatever, and he lets out like a single tear when Whitebeard dies. And notably, Rayleigh doesn't really seem to exhibit any concern, or like there's no scene specifically with like Rayleigh mourning the death of Ace, implying that he didn't know, but I feel like it's really weird that he doesn't know. We also get the Ace light novel here, the first one, where he does go to Sabaody, and he has a fight with a vice admiral there. He meets Isuka there, who's like his love interest slash, like rival, like marine rival, like Smoker is to Luffy, or like Garp was to Roger. Isuka is Ace's like rival, right? And so there's a scene there. There's no scene though where like Ace runs into Rayleigh. Although I will say, like, you can kind of infer this, that even if Rayleigh didn't approach Ace or didn't talk to him at all at the archipelago, I like to think that maybe Rayleigh, heard about him and saw him on the island, and maybe Rayleigh, like from the shadows or from a distance, might have been like, oh, that's Porcus D. Ace. Glug, glug, glug. Yeah, that's Roger's son, all right. And then he's like, maybe he was like, yeah, I don't want to, you know what I mean? He didn't, maybe if he seeks me out, that's different, but he doesn't have the captain's name. He seems to be doing good on his own. He has his own crew, because this is back when Ace still just had the Spade Pirates. He wasn't part of Whitebeard's crew yet. So it's just like, you know what? Seems like a strong young man. He's got a Logia, he's got his own crew with him. He's made it all the way to the halfway point. If our paths cross, maybe if he seeks me out, that's different. Like, you were my dad's first mate. Now, he got involved with Luffy's journey, and that was a little bit, well, Rayleigh was in the auction house at the time, and so Luffy kind of showed up to rescue Kami, and their paths crossed in a very direct way. But also Shanks showed up, like a few years prior to that, and told Rayleigh all about Luffy, and like, oh man, Rayleigh, I met this kid and I sacrificed my arm and it's crazy. He was saying the same stuff that the captain did. And so, Rayleigh had a vested interest to be like, yeah, I'd like to meet Luffy someday. Shanks spoke very highly of you. I'm kind of interested on where your journey goes, right? And so with Ace, maybe it was just a little bit too awkward or weird, or just like, nah, he's okay. He's doing all right on his own, right? Now, Gabon 100% knew. There's no debate. He brings it up. He's like, Garp told me. Right? So, once again, I don't see it why, like, Gabon didn't go on, like, an entire adventure scouring the globe trying to find Ace. Like, once again, maybe he's like, okay, and keep in mind, when Gabon is telling Shanks about this, it's in the flashback 14 years ago, so Ace would have been, like, 6. Right? Like, he was just a kid at this point. I guess Ace died when he was 20, so that was 2 years ago, so he'd be 22 right now, so Ace would have been 8, right? So, like, obviously, he's just a kid at this point. Honestly, Gabon was probably like, dude, if I even tried to go find him and just be like, you are the son of my captain, that might actually end up drawing more attention to Ace, and maybe that was the one thing Gabon was like, the kid has done a pretty good job of staying out of the government's, like, purview up until now, out of their sights, so probably shouldn't, like, poke the bear, as it were, right? Gabon or Rayleigh show up to just be like, yes, you are the son of Gol D. Roger, Ace. Here, take his mighty sword. I have guarded it for decades. It is your birthright. They tried to do anything like that, that might actually end up raising the alarm more. So that makes sense why they didn't get involved with, like, Ace's childhood in any way. Like, that makes perfect sense. He was perfectly, well, not perfectly safe, but he was relatively out of the government's sights, out in Dawn Island, in Fuchsia Village, and in Mount Colbo, out in the middle of freaking nowhere, really. Getting involved with the Grey Terminal and the Goa Kingdom and stuff, but even in that regard, the government really didn't give a shit about the Goa Kingdom. It was really out in the middle of the freaking boonies as far as they were concerned, right? So, yeah, like, in that regard, I could see them getting involved with that. And then when Ace finally did leave Fuchsia and become a pirate and have his own adventures and things, maybe some of the Roger pirates did consider it. And in fact, like, outside of Gabon and Rayleigh, remember, there was a lot of other members of the Roger Pirates. There was Spencer, and there was Don Kino, and there was Millet Pine, the Torturer, and there was Aereo, and there was all these other people. Who's to say that Ace didn't run across one of them at one point? It might not have been a huge, big, bombastic encounter. Maybe they were in a town at one point. They walk into a tavern that the Spade Pirates do, and Aereo is at the bar having a drink. And maybe he approaches Ace and talks to him, or maybe he doesn't. It's just like, whatever. Ace would have passed through the Twin Capes, so he would have bumped into Crocus. Did they have any interaction? Maybe Crocus realized he was Roger's son. Maybe he didn't. I also don't think every single pirate crew that passes through Reverse Mountain stops at Crocus's lighthouse. Sometimes Crocus isn't even at the lighthouse. Sometimes he's inside Laboon. Sometimes Laboon gets in the way when a new ship comes down. Sometimes he doesn't. I just don't see Crocus literally meeting with, like, Hawkins and Beiji and Kid and Bonnie and, like, every single pirate. Cavendish. Can you imagine Crocus running into Cavendish and is like, he's handing out, he's like, hello there, are you ready for the grand line? Do you have a log pose? I have a whole crate of them over here to hand them out every single time someone comes down. It's the least I can do. I think that was like a special thing with the Strats. I think most of the pirates that go down Reverse Mountain just sail right past the Twin Capes. They don't bother to hang out and talk to Crocus. That's the secret. Most people skip Crocus. You don't want to skip the Crocus mini quest because you get a free log pose and some information about the Grand Line about it, you know? So, yeah. Also, the Strats were maybe a little bit uninformed on the Grand Line when they first landed in. You know, Crocus kind of explained to them the whole magnetic charge thing. Maybe some other pirate crews already knew about that, right? Okay. Anyway. Ace would have ran into Crocus, or maybe could have ran into Crocus. He was on Sabaody, same as Rayleigh, and Gabon knew about him. But Gabon, he spends most of his time with his hot giant wife on Elbaf. We did see him traveling to the lighthouse to visit Crocus at one point in the cover page, you know, so we know he does that shit. But yeah, I'm not really particularly bothered by it, you know, like Ace was not their responsibility. Now Shanks, on the other hand, that's a different thing. Shanks basically says because him and Buggy were effectively the children of Roger, that sort of makes Ace, who is the biological son of Roger, Shanks's little brother, just by the way they're viewing this. It also makes Ace Buggy's little brother, which is really funny when you look at that scene where Buggy and Ace were hanging out on the big top and they were having that party after Alabasta and everything, and Ace is just chilling out and just be like, yeah, I'm Ace, how you doing? And then Buggy tells the crew a little bit about the Whitebeard pirates. It was like a really serious moment for Buggy where he was like, okay, men, you never mess with the Whitebeard pirates ever, because I've dealt with him before, right? You never piss Whitebeard off. And then they all had a big party, right? And so there you go. That was so nice of Buggy to give a party, to hold a party for his little bro. Isn't that great? That's awesome, right? So, yeah, and then by extension, because Ace is also brothers with Sabo and Luffy, Shanks, Buggy, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy are all therefore brothers, and Luffy is still the youngest. He's the baby brother out of all of them. The oldest would be, actually, because Shanks and Buggy are the same age, but when are their birthdays? Because we know that. Shanks was born March 9th. Okay, and Buggy, when's his birthday? March 9th for Shanks, and Buggy was born August 8th. So Shanks is the oldest. Shanks is older, so go Shanks, then Buggy, and then I think Sabo and Ace are also the same age. So Ace was born January 1st, so he would be the next oldest. I don't know when Sabo's birthday is, but it's probably not January 1st. So it would go Shanks, Buggy, Ace, Sabo, and then Luffy, who was born 3 years later after Ace and Sabo. So there we go. Okay, that's all right then. We have the 5 brothers, the story of 5 brothers. One of them's dead, but the 4 brothers, and that actually is a movie, 4 brothers. So, you know, go check it out. It's actually not a bad movie. Mark Wahlberg's in it. Yeah, okay. All right, now, what if things went differently, though? What if Ace did not despise his father growing up? Okay, what if he was actually inspired by his father? What if he actually heard the story from Garp about his past, about Roger and everything that happened, okay? By the way, some people have said that Garp shouldn't even have told Ace about Roger. I disagree. I really genuinely feel, no matter the circumstances, a child should know about his parents, right? Like, a child should know about his biological parents. All right, absolutely, right? So this is why I get kind of annoyed. I made a whole video about Naruto in that regard, where, like, you know, that it was kind of decided to just never tell Naruto about his parents. And it's like, even if it was like, well, that might cause, you know, people like ninjas coming to murder Naruto, I'd be like, Naruto should still know about his mom and dad. I don't care. He should still know who his parents are. All right. He should know, right? Anyway, same thing with Ace. I feel like Ace should know about his dad. So I'm not going to begrudge Garp for that. Garp probably waited until Ace was old enough. And when Ace asked the question, like, hey, Gramps, who's my dad? Garp would have probably told him, and then there you go. And then he's like, I despise my father. How dare he? I'm not going to be like my dad. You know, everybody gives me those glares and those looks because of the man that my dad was, and I'm not going to be like him. I'm going to be my own pirate, but I'm going to do my things my way. You know, that was the idea from Ace right there. So let's say Ace actually looked up to Roger and actually accepted the name, and his name was Gol D Ace. Now you got things that are a little different. Now things are a little different here. Because I think in this version, Ace would actually go out of his way to meet with Roger's old crew. He would go out of his way on Sabaody, like, I hear Silver's Rayleigh's here. He was the first mate of Roger's crew. By the way, there's also no way that Ace would not know that Rayleigh, the Dark King, was the, first mate of the Roger crew, and that Rayleigh, he hangs out on Sabaody. That's where he hangs out. Everybody knows he's there. Okay, it's not a mystery that Rayleigh's hanging out on Sabaody. Even the Marines knew that. So the fact is, Ace chose not to go seek out Rayleigh. All right, and Ace probably also chose not to. I mean, Rayleigh also, vice versa, chose to not seek out Ace. But in this version of events, Ace does go to meet Rayleigh and chats with him and all that sort of shit, right? And he also goes to meet Gabon, maybe when he goes to Elbaf and everything like that. Well, did Ace go to Elbaf? Yeah, I mean, he made it all the way to Wano with the Spade Pirates and met Yamato. Elbaf is like, 2 islands, or 1 island actually, after Elbaf. Kid went right there from Wano. So yeah, I think Ace probably made it to Elbaf as well, probably, I would assume. Could have met Gabon there as well in this version of reality, right? And if he met these people beforehand and talked about them and actually formed a connection with them, maybe they would have gotten more involved with Marineford. Who knows? Maybe they actually would have showed up and been like, all right, he's, he like looks up to Roger, the captain. Maybe we will go to make sure he can survive to carry on the captain's legacy. Or maybe they still wouldn't have. Remember when Luffy had Ace's Vivre card. This is Luffy. This is Ace's brother, right? Not biologically, but they're brothers, right? And Ace's Vivre card, after Thriller Bark, it starts to burn down. Does Luffy drop everything and go to save his brother? No. He is worried, but at the same time, he's like, you know what? That's Ace's adventure. He's off doing his own thing, and if he's gotten into a little bit of trouble, that's his own adventure. I don't want to come running to his, every single time that he's in a spot, I don't want to come running to him, right? Okay? That's the basic idea. Now, eventually, when Luffy does find out that he's sent for execution, he kind of throws that out the window and been like, oh shit, this is actually really bad. The Vivre card is getting really small. I'm going to go save my brother. All right, and so it comes to that. So I don't know. Maybe, the Roger crew would have been like, yeah, let's not go. I don't want to coddle him. Roger's son, he's his own guy. He's out there doing his own thing. Oh, he's going to be executed pretty damn soon. Okay, we should probably go save him. We want to make sure he makes it out of this alive. It's just some way to try to finagle it to get Rayleigh and Gabon and some of the other members of the Roger crew all at Marineford at once. Holy shit. Things would have went maybe a little differently then. Blackbeard being there, would he have still managed to kill Whitebeard? Would he have managed to take the Guru Guru no Mi if Gabon and Rayleigh and some of the other former members of Roger crew show up? I don't know. Maybe he would have. Maybe he wouldn't have. I don't know. But it's an interesting what if. It's an interesting what if for sure. But Shanks did meet Ace at one point, or rather Ace sought out Shanks to thank him for, his brother and everything, for Luffy and giving him the hat and everything, so he wants to go thank him properly. And so they met in that, Winter Island at one point. The scene in the anime where they actually showed Shanks with 2 arms at that point, where he would have only had 1 arm, right? There's one version of that episode where he has 2 arms. So, yeah, there's a scene there where they chat. That's one of those things where I feel like Shanks knew Ace was Roger's son. Shanks didn't say shit. Shanks didn't say anything to Ace about it. It's one of those things, once again, where you kind of just don't bring it up unless they bring it up, right? Like if Ace brought it up, like, by the way, Shanks, I heard you sailed on Gol D Roger's ship. I was like, yes, I did. Me and Buggy both. We were apprentice pirates. I'd be like, did you know my father was Gold Roger? And it was like, I knew. Gabon told me, and Garp told him, so, I was aware, but I didn't want to bring it up. Seemed like a touchy subject, you know what I mean? And then they could talk about it. In fact, the only person, other than Luffy and Sabo, that I think Ace ever told about Roger being his dad was Whitebeard. I mean, it was more about Ace learning to trust Whitebeard than Whitebeard trusting Ace, but at that moment where they were having a conversation, it was private, and it was like, my dad was Gold Roger. And then Whitebeard his reaction was just like, really? You don't say. Huh. Small world. Glug, glug, glug. And then, Ace is like, well, is that all you're going to say? Is that a big deal or whatever? He was the king of the pirates. Everybody all over the world fucking hates my dad, Whitebeard is just like, yeah, so what? You're not him. It's kind of a fun little piece of trivia, I guess. That's really the way Whitebeard viewed it. It's just like, okay, yeah, you're Roger's son. I mean, You're your own person. You're your own man. That's all there is to it. I mean, yeah, if you want me to talk about him, tell you some fun stories about it, I guess I could do that. But like, really, there's nothing more. I'm not gonna say you're destined for some greatness or some shit because you're his son. You know what I mean? You're making up your own adventure. And I think that's really what Ace really kind of needed to hear at that moment, right? For him, it was like a really big deal. Like, oh, this is like the first person I've met that didn't make a huge deal out of my dad being the king of the pirates. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Ace viewed Whitebeard as his father figure. There it is, right there, yeah. So yeah, and also going back to Shanks, it does give a whole new perspective for Shanks going to Marineford to try to save Ace. And even before that, Shanks going through so much trouble, first sending a letter through Rockstar and then going to visit Whitebeard himself. Like, I want you to stop Ace with this whole Blackbeard shit because this isn't going to end well for him, right? That was Shanks being worried about his little brother, right? And Shanks even tried to stop it at Marineford, but Kaido waylaid him. You know, Kaido showed up and, you know, threw a wrench in all that stuff. And then Shanks was like, shit, maybe there might not even have been a war. Because I'll be honest with you, Whitebeard and Shanks's crew and all of the allies and Luffy and all of the Impel Down prisoners show up. There might just be a moment where, like, Sengoku is like, okay, everybody just stop for a moment. Just stop for a fucking moment, right? Because we have 2 Yonko and just everybody back off, okay? And then Sengoku goes to talk by himself with Whitebeard and Shanks and just been like, okay, if we fight, it's gonna be like, it's gonna punch a hole in the world. So, like, what are we doing here? It's like, hand over Ace and we're leaving. Okay. I don't know if that's how it would have went, because, like, I don't know, but that would be playing with fire there. The Marines versus 2 emperors. Yeah. So I don't know how that would have went if they would have just handed Ace over at that point and just been like, all right, here you go. You know, I don't know. It would have been a big blow to the Marines if that would have happened. What would have happened if that... I guess there would have still been a war. There still would have been a conflict. I don't think the Marines would have handed Ace over like that. But would the Gods Knights have gotten involved, like, to even the odds or something? Like, I don't know. Would the Gorosei have showed up for that? Like, I don't know, man. That's a different perspective. All right. Well, anyway, that was the video. Just kind of wanted to chat about Ace and, you know, what the rest of the Roger crew knew or didn't know, and then Shanks and all that kind of stuff, because we've learned some new info. Well, we already kind of had this information, but, like, knowing that the characters knew this information is the new information, right? Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching 101 signing out, y'all. Have a good night.